You ready? Good evening, and thank you for attending the December 13th, 2021 meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. In accordance with the Westerville City School District's COVID-19 guidelines, in-person attendance requires the wearing of a mask or facial covering while indoors. This evening's agenda will be displayed on the screens in the front of the room. You may also follow along by connecting to the district's website at www.wcsoh.org. Click on our district link, then select Board of Education, and then Board Docs Agenda, and select this evening's meeting. There will be two opportunities to address the board this evening, the first being Agenda Item 6.01. The first set of comments is relative to Agenda Items 7.01 through 11.08. Please state the agenda item or items that you are referencing at the beginning of your comments. The second opportunity is Agenda Item 12.01. There is a sign-up sheet located on the table in the back of the room. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board. A timer will be displayed on the screen in the front of the room. And with that, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman?
Here.
Mrs. Davidson?
Here.
Mr. Velardo?
Here.
Dr. Nussbaker is absent. Mr. Bell?
Here. Would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, moving on to Agenda Item 3, which are district highlights and recognitions. And this evening, we have one recognition, a board member recognition. So I would ask Reverend Velardo if you would please stand, if you'd come out front here and stand. And yes, sir. This is a resolution of appreciation for Reverend Rick Velardo. Whereas Reverend Rick Velardo was elected to the Westerville City Schools Board of Education in November of 2013, and whereas during his 8-year term, Reverend Velardo has served 2 years as president and 2 years as vice president, lending his expertise as legislative liaison, community engagement, and communication liaison, and policy liaison. He also served on the district equity team and the business advisory council. And whereas he was determined to listen and learn so he could help influence the financial legislation which heavily impacts our Westerville City School District, and currently serves as president of the Franklin County School Board Member Alliance, and serves on the steering committee for Vouchers Hurts Ohio. And whereas he was a strong proponent of providing more support and opportunities for students and families in the southern end of our district, and was instrumental in getting the ballot issue passed for 2 new creatively designed and forward-looking schools to be built over the next 2 years in Minerva Park. And whereas Reverend Velardo was focused on increasing the educational and social emotional support for our students while carefully using our taxpayer-provided funds. Financial barriers were removed for those students participating in sports and extracurricular activities by reducing student fees. He helped to set a course to encourage enrollment of underrepresented students in our high school IB and AP courses, seeing nearly a 300% increase. Therefore, be it resolved that the Westerville City Schools Board of Education, the superintendent and treasurer commend Reverend Rick Velardo for his outstanding leadership and compassion for students and staff, and thank him for the role he played in helping to create and maintain excellence in educational opportunities for the children of the Westerville community. So from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of all of our hearts, we sincerely want to thank you for your service to the students, the families, the staff of the Westerville City School District, and for the Westerville community as a whole. Thank you for your service, Reverend Velardo. So you can come.
Vaughn has asked me to say a few things for just 20, 25 minutes, and so I'll try to keep it. Security. I have a few things I want to say at the end of the meeting, but the main thing is to thank my fellow board members. And sorry Nancy couldn't be here tonight, but from fellow board members, and certainly Ms. Marshall and Dr. Kellogg. Just I'll offer a few comments later, but this is highly unexpected, but deeply appreciated, and most of all, thank my family for being here, my bride, Cynthia, and my sons, Anthony and Stephen, who were in elementary school and middle school when I started this journey, and now as senior and second year at the University of Cincinnati. So to all of you in the back of the room, those of you on this floor, I may say a couple of things later, but I am just deeply appreciative of what you all do, and I have no regrets about serving alongside each and every one of you. So thank you all for this very much.
Okay, the next item on our agenda, agenda item 4.01, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on November 22nd, 2021. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion, corrections, additions? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 5, which are reports. Our first report this evening, agenda item 5.01, the superintendent's report. Dr. Kellogg, would you please share with us this evening?
Thank you, President Bell, members of the board. Thank you for giving me some time this evening to talk about a couple issues that I know are in people's minds. I want to start by doing an update in regard to transportation services. This has been one of the more disruptive part of what we're doing right now, and I know it's impacting families, and there's a lot of questions and suggestions about how we might change what we're doing. So I want to talk about that a little bit. before I do a couple things, first of all, hats off to the Transportation Department and all the drivers. When you hear some of what's going on, what they're dealing with, and understand what they're doing to provide the level of service that they are and how hard they're working to make that happen, I'm greatly appreciative of what they do. Second is, to the public overall, this is really an unanticipated problem of this magnitude and frequency when we started the school year. Frankly, we've always kept a watchful eye on transportation, the services, mostly due to driver shortages and having enough drivers. But this year, like across the country, this issue of employment and having enough employees is hitting us in lots of spaces, not just here. Food service, custodial, maintenance, substitute teachers. So it's hitting us in lots and lots of different places. And we're trying to manage through all those things. So no one's sitting on their hands admiring the problem. There's a lot of problem solving going on. But to the public, it may not be as transparent behind the scenes about what actually has to happen to make some of those ideas happen. So I'll talk about that a little bit as well. Let me just start a little bit about the problem. So our problem this year isn't drivers, it's subs, having enough substitutes. So our driver attendance is pretty consistent with what we've had in the past in terms of absentee rate. It's not really COVID-related. We've really only had a small number of COVID-related driver absences and not multiple drivers at the same time. So it hasn't been that. The fact is, for example, just a few weeks ago around Thanksgiving, we were missing already down 4 or 5 of our regular drivers. So those positions were posted. So we had openings. We then also had 4 drivers who were on long-term leave for a variety of reasons. So they were out of the system. Throw in there at that time our subs, the number we had subs available, about 4, and you don't really have enough to cover the system. So when those days are happening, before we go to changing schedules and having late arrivals and early dismissals, we start pulling other people who can drive. So oftentimes that's some of our administrators in the department who's supposed to be running the routes and taking care of business are now driving buses throughout the day and not being able to do the other work. So that makes problem solving about what might be other solutions a little bit difficult when 60% of their time period they're out driving routes rather than sitting in the office and addressing some of these. So the real issue is having enough substitutes. Now the good news is we do have several drivers who are in the queue, so to speak, but you don't just walk in and sign up and say, I want to start driving a bus. There's a time frame for training in there, et cetera, that has to happen. And through that process, sometimes you lose people to attrition. So last week we had 9 in the queue, we're down to 6. But if we can get those people through and get them driving, that's going to add a lot to what we're trying to get done. So what happens when we're missing drivers beyond the early dismissals and late arrivals and other people driving is, as many of our families know, we then suffer double back routes, where a bus who has a particular school will run a route and then come back and have to run another route for that same school. Well, that creates a ripple effect of a delay down the line. If it's at a high school with a double back route, they're then going to be late going to the middle school, and then if they have to double back there, which sometimes is the case, you're getting really late by the end of the day for your elementary school kids. So that time frame between our tiers being in the morning we start with high school, then we go middle, then we go elementary. End of the day, we reverse the order. We go high school out first, middle school out, and then elementary. The time period between those tiers is the time period to collect ourselves and get buses back en route. That's where the double backs happen, and that's where we're trying to create time. So if we do have to double back or have to have drivers do something else, we have time in between. That's where that comes from. The other piece of this is our system is not simply driving kids from home to school. We have lots of specialized transportation. In fact, for some of the stuff we have 6 high school shuttles, 12 middle school shuttles, 35 elementary school shuttles. And these are everything from specialized transportation for special education kids. We have our van program as well. Magnet schools programs. So the kids in the magnet schools are all over the district. So we're picking up all over the district to bring them to the 2 magnet schools. So they have a specialized transportation system. All-day kindergarten at Longfellow. You also have AM and PM kindergarten flow in there. We have students who are overflow, who they can't attend their home school because of the numbers in that class, and so we provide transportation to them. We have our career center kids going to both Delaware and the city of Columbus. Some of those programs are half-day programs, AM or PM. Some of those programs are all-day programs. We have IB shuttles for students from North and Central who attend the IB program, who catch shuttles to go to the IB program at South. And then we're required by law to provide transportation to all of our non-publics and community schools. So you throw all that in the mix, and it's a complicated system of running routes and not putting ourselves in a position, as we've done for years and years, of avoided over-investing in how much transportation services we can provide. Now the problem is, even if we wanted to expand services and bring more drivers on and more buses on, they can't find them. So we have that problem going on. Part of that story that's frustrating is there does not appear anything on the horizon that says that's going to change in terms of the employment market around us and how it impacts us. So we kind of deal with all that. So trying to create that space, that time. And knowing that if we don't do that, which most of the districts around us aren't implementing the kind of program we are, they're just suffering through canceled routes, double backs, and triple backs, and people are just left to figure it out. So what happens when you have when you have 3 or 4 buses at a school have a double back? Those kids may be a half an hour or 45 minutes late to the start of the school day. So in all those classrooms, when they show up, those kids come off the bus, they're 45 minutes late to a class that's already started. It's just as disruptive as doing a late start for one elementary, and then the early dismissals we're seeing in the high school. You still impact the instructional time. It just plays out differently. Where this gets very complicated is this is where the ripple effect is. So we are looking at solutions. We're looking at modifying the start and end times for our schools. But now we're getting into rerouting. On a regular year in the summertime, it's about a 6-week process for us to route our system. And then we have to bid that by contract with our drivers. They get to bid and pick which route they want. Changing the routing system at this point is more than a 6-week project because you're really starting from scratch. Most years we can replicate what we had the year before. Most kids live in the same spot. The buses are so it's really kind of easier to do. If you change start and end times, you got a whole disruption to the system. And so that doesn't seem plausible between now and like January 4th on a large scale. But we are looking at, for example, right now we're doing a 30-minute early release for middle, an hour early release for high school. We're looking at shortening those, that if we need those in the future. Plus, like I said, we have drivers in the queue for potential being substitutes for. So there's some sunshine on the horizon, so to speak, to move this thing along. Keep in mind, rerouting also means, or changing school start time and end times, means all of the vendor drivers, we still have outside contracted services, all of their time frames change. It impacts all the community and non-publics that we're traveling to. It also impacts anybody who's in childcare and their start and end time and pick up in it. So there's connected problems to this. It's not a simple flip of the switch and say everything starts later next time around. I know that one of the suggestions has been, can we just make the early release time for middle and high school a permanent change? Well, the state requires us to have a minimum number of instructional hours. And so we're eroding that over time as it's been. We keep track of that. We have a couple places, and I'll talk about that in a minute, where we have to keep an eye on things because we're kind of concerned about the instructional hours. If we were to move to a permanent change, we will definitely run into an instructional hour problem. And if we have any kind of a winter with any kind of inclement weather, we're gonna run into problems. And then we're getting into makeup time. And what days in the future that were vacation days, do we now want to come back, extended days? There's a whole another ball of wax of conversations that we prefer to avoid for our families, et cetera. So, and all those may be, depending if the wheels fall off, so to speak, not literally, but figuratively, all those are on the table as possibilities, bad possibilities if we have to go to that route. That's what we're trying to avoid. So the instructional hour problem becomes part of the issue as we track that. And we know we have some spots, for example, PM kindergarten, where we're getting close to the edge where those numbers of hours we're missing could be impacted. The preschool downstairs is part of that. So we're looking at that. The other way to solve the instructional hours time is to provide more instructional time. So in some cases, in some of our schools, it might be a change to the bell schedule inside the school to lengthen the instructional time period of classes and take time from other places. So for example, in a high school, this is hypothetical, don't anybody walk away and say this is what they're doing. Hypothetically, you could change the class change time between classes by a minute. And for every one of those class change times, you pick up a couple minutes. Now you got shorter time frame between classes, and not a great solution. We're already pretty close to the bone on that as is. Changing lunch schedules. So there's not a lot of wiggle room in there, but we're looking at that. The other possibility is looking at the remote learning model as a place to capture back minutes at some point. Don't have a solution to that one, but that's a way to add instructional time back in so that we don't run into the problem with the state on not reporting. So all of those are possibilities and being talked about. That'll be a big part of the work over the winter holiday. Long-term, I would anticipate opening next year with a different start-end time across the system that provides more buffer so that we can do that. And that will need to be communicated with families because that changes all those things we just talked about, right? If we have a later start at some end or later, longer day at the other end, that changes everybody's schedules, including all of our staff members. So we are looking at that one, excuse me, for a longer-term solution. Trying to check my notes to see if I missed anything. So let me stop there and see if the board has any questions or want any clarification on transportation, where we're at.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know it's a struggle every day. I want to acknowledge that we all realize it's a struggle for families every day. You know, we get the call at 5:55 on all 12 phones in my house and restack the day, right? And feel fortunate to most days be in a situation to be able to restack the day. Sometimes we get stuck and can't do that, and that's interesting. But appreciate that everybody's working on that. So a couple of specific questions. You mentioned the problem really is substitute drivers. Can you talk to us about what it looks like to be a substitute driver? We're recruiting substitute drivers, I'm sure, but just what does that mean in case anybody listening is interested?
So if you're interested, just contact our transportation department, they'll walk you through. And we have, as the board knows, in past years, because we've always been challenged with keeping enough drivers to keep things going, and it's always been a concern. And over the time period, the board has approved changes to incentive programs to get our drivers in. So training isn't free. It's time and it's money. And so we've offered incentives to make that palatable to people who are interested in driving. And we're streamlining the training services, making it easier to do, making it faster to do. We don't want to leave a lot of lag time so people change their mind. We just want to get them in the system and get them rolling. So that's what we try to do. And then this is an economy in which the employee has a lot of leverage. So you may have substitutes to say, I'd like to substitute Tuesdays and Thursdays. And another substitute may say, I'll do Mondays and Wednesdays. And so in the putting this all together, when it happens, those are the variables that people like Randy Snyder and Bob Lynn are doing over transportation to make that four-dimensional puzzle work for the day and who's going to drive what. So we're getting a call, I'm getting a call at 5:15, you're getting a call about 6. They're starting at about 4, trying to figure it all out. I know that people would like notification earlier, perhaps the evening before. If we know the evening before we're at that spot, we'll do that. But oftentimes, it's the one or two that calls off the next morning that send us over the edge and causes us to have to do those things. And so there's not as much predictability. But to answer your question, if people are interested in that, contacting our transportation office, they can walk people right through on how to do that. And you know, if you like driving a big machine with a lot of kids in it, it's a great opportunity in snowy weather through suburban neighborhoods where people double park. And
Yeah, you're not the marketing department,
Yeah.
are you? No.
and our drivers are sensational. You know, the stories of how they take care of kids and the things they do
Yeah,
are just
they really
phenomenal.
are.
So.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, thanks to everybody in the transportation department and all these other departments where we're running short-staffed. I know it's a slog. I saw Randy Snyder walking in the Christmas parade, and I wished he was home taking a nap. So a question too, and maybe this is for Dr. Hopkins about sort of the academic side, and if this isn't the right place to address that, but you know, when our schools are on remote learning, there's the blizzard bag. I have a child at Westerville South. There was some confusion on when they were on a remote day about, we don't have blizzard bags. What are we supposed to do? And they sort of seemed to have figured it out throughout the day. But if somebody could address that, just to bring some clarity to what should you, sort of be ready as a family for if you get called off on a remote day, what should you be looking for, would be helpful.
Joe, so I think some of the confusion was over the blizzard bags, which brings to mind a specific kind of reason for being out, right? So we built blizzard bags for inclement weather after the 4 snow days, when we then have to start adding on. So we had built those out, and then as we were getting into this, we asked elementary and middle to send materials home ahead of time, because it's no good on the day of, there's nobody to send them home to. And we didn't want those to be technology dependent, because we know not everybody has that available, although we are now putting those 4,000 Chromebooks that the board knows about from the grant out to people. So those were used when we had remote days. So there's where the confusion comes, right? We talk about blizzard bags and remote days and blizzard bag. Thank you, legislators, for naming everything that could simply be called homework, because it's just work you're doing at home and not at school, which is the definition of remote. So I think some clarification on those definitions, what we're using. We had that discussion today, as a matter of fact, and I think we could do that as we come out of the break to clarify what we're doing. High school, we did not do blizzard bags, because you do the math, there's 6 teachers, 6 or 7 teachers, everybody sending work home. In that case, we relied more on the technology communication piece with those folks, and we may need to clean that up as we move forward.
Great, thank you. I think it would be helpful if we could just clarify that for everybody, because I know everybody's probably going to experience this if they haven't yet. I mean, I hope not, but just so they know what they're looking for that morning would be great. So I think that's it for me for now. Thanks.
I don't know the tentacles that would be attached to the question I'm going to ask you, and so I don't expect any immediate definitive answer. Do you happen to know approximately how many students for non-public and community schools we are required to transport? And I ask that question because I know that other districts are considering, because that's by statute, that's by law, we have to do that. Unless you receive I shouldn't call it a dispensation, but you know what I mean, and can offer to those students, that's what impractical to transport. And since it's impracticable to transport, we are going to pay this amount of money so those students can find their transportation on their own. Would that save us bus drivers for Westerville City School District students? You understand what I mean by I don't know the tentacles attached to that. I'm just wondering.
So our neighbors next door, Worthington, there was a piece out about what they're doing. I don't think that the piece was clear. So here's my understanding, and if any of my team needs to correct me, feel free. But my understanding of it is annually we bring to the board those students who we deem impractical to transport, and we offer them payment in lieu of. That's a state piece. There are parameters for declaring a stop impractical. The student's not impractical to transport. It's going to that particular building that's impractical. I hate the way they've termed it, but that's the way they do it. So there are some variables, number of students, distance traveled, how long it takes, in which case we were able to say, we're not able to transport, it's impractical for us to transport, therefore we're going to do a payment in lieu. I don't know how in the middle of a year when you've already been transporting them, you all of a sudden declare them impractical to transport and meet those parameters. I don't think you're going to be on firm footing all of a sudden declaring that this particular school, these particular students go in this particular school that we've been transporting for half the year are now impractical. Because it's not that the struggles we're going through don't mean we get to take it out on them, so to speak, if that makes sense. So the logic behind it is, all those students who attend those schools live in our school district boundary, and their residents, their families are paying property tax like everybody else. This is a service, and there are others that we provide as well to those schools, those students and those families that we provide. So I don't think there's a solution in there by simply cutting off that piece along the way. So I think
That's
we have to
helpful.
have a solution.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, just for a point of clarification, so one of the solutions that we are looking to implement that the board has already approved for the Transportation Department is adding that fourth tier for next year, and we believe that that will help us considerably in terms of reducing the number of instances where we will have to delay start and early dismissals.
Yes, and it will. That's what we're going for. The other thing I want to put in place is, at this point, we're not trying to develop any recommendations that reduce the service level we provide. There are places where we could reduce service levels to our families and reduce the pressure on ourselves. And at this point, I would prefer not to go down that path unless we get into a really bad situation. I think we can get past this hurdle as much pain as it's causing now. I just don't feel like changing that transportation service. We've worked hard from the cuts back in prior to 13 to move transportation services back to the level we're at. And we do arguably offer, compared to a lot of districts, a pretty vast array of services. When you start talking about all-day kindergarten, overflowing, magnet schools, these are adding to the stressor. So yes, fourth tier is what we're looking at for next year. And we'll start communication with that as we get back into the new year so people see what's coming. And it'll coincide with the opening of the new elementary.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, was that the end of your report, or was that
I
just
wish
the
my
end of that
report
part
said,
of your
here's the
report?
solution, and, but it is, I hope community sees we're not sitting on our hands and twiddling our thumbs and saying, isn't this a nice problem to hand to people? It's frustrating to have a dilemma. This is far beyond a problem. This is a dilemma that trying to find good solutions is challenging. So I appreciate the team's efforts to continue doing that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kellogg. Moving on to agenda item 5.02, our Portrait of a Graduate report. Dr. Hopkins and the team.
Good evening, everybody. President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall, it's our pleasure, and we're really excited to share with you guys some information about this Portrait of a Graduate. It's something that this team behind me has been working so hard on, and it's so great to have an opportunity to share with you a lot of the information about the incredible work that they're doing. This evening's presentation, as you notice, is called Portrait to Practice. What we'd like to do is highlight to you some of the steps that we're moving so that we are going beyond just a portrait of a graduate to actually the practice that's going to be taking place in our schools to make this a reality. So what I'd like to go ahead and first talk about kind of the history, where we've been. The slide up here talks about the journey that we've been on, starting in the year 2018 to 2019. Members of the district here kind of partner with our SOAR team over at Battelle for Kids, but also, even more importantly, our opportunity to collaborate with other districts who have already been on this journey to learn from them and to improve what we're going to be developing. So following that, starting in the year 2020-21, we made probably the most important step, and that was reaching out to the community. We were very intentional about reaching out to our teachers, reaching out to our parents and our families, and also our business owners to identify what would you like to see that's part of our portrait of a graduate. We wanted to make sure this was not a decision made by about 6 individuals, but by over 1,000 individuals, and that's how many actually contributed to sharing their thoughts. And what was really interesting, as you'll see in just a moment, the 6 competencies, they were all ranked very highly among all of these subgroups, so that was exciting to see along the way. So in 2021, we started to develop the portrait of the graduate, started to share this with the community, and then this fall, like I said, we've been launching the Moving from Portrait to Practice, and it really started at the beginning of the school year at one of our professional development seminars, or WE Day, where we had a number of teachers come in, and it was just really exciting for them to really jump on board and see, A, that they're already doing a lot of this great work already, but B, trying to see how can we move this from just, hey, we occasionally do some collaboration, we occasionally do some critical thinking activities, to saying, you know what, how can we embed these intentionally and with deliberate intention along the way. So that's kind of where our journey has taken us to this point. And really the why behind this, we really thought really hard about this, because we wanted to make sure this was not just one more thing, but something that had some intentionality behind it all the way. We believe that the portrait of a graduate's a framework that the community at large can utilize to align both our work and our resources. What you'll see in just a moment is our portrait. And when we make decisions, whether it's financial decisions, staffing decisions, or curriculum instruction, we want to see that it is aligned to that. And so that's what one of the main goals for our portrait of a graduate is. So as you see, this is the finalized graphic. And this graphic went through many iterations here, a lot of great feedback along the way. But what I really want to point out is kind of that inner ring, if you will. You see 2 phrases there, skills and aptitudes coupled with academic content. We're calling out our district's continued emphasis on academic content. As you will soon hear from Michelle Relford and Dr. Jennifer Knapp, our curriculum and instruction team are continually collaborating with our teachers and our administrators to ensure that we have an appropriate focus on the district's and state's learning standards. The portrait of a graduate is not prioritizing skills and aptitudes over academic content. As the graphic up here shows, they are working together to foster deeper learning. Now I'm going to turn it over to Juliet Peoples, who will share some more information about the competencies.
So we're going to take some time to look at the 6 competencies tonight. You have your social emotional wellness, your adaptability, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and problem solving. Let's take a look at the first one. Social emotional wellness. We want students to develop a healthy sense of self, learn self-regulation strategies, and demonstrate perseverance to achieve personal and collective goals through responsible and caring decision-making. You can see this as evidenced by many of the programs that we're bringing into the district to support students in that wellness journey, and many of the resources that we have available on a daily basis in our classrooms and in our buildings. Adaptability. If anything, the past year and a half has taught us is that we need to be adaptable, and it comes at us at all levels. So we want students to be able to demonstrate flexibility when presented with various situations and work effectively in an ever-changing world. And collaboration. We want students to be able to work together to seek, contribute, and respond to diverse perspectives and feedback to achieve a common goal. And you can also see this in many of the activities that we do with students on a regular basis, both in the classroom, extracurricular, and just some of the opportunities that they've been able to be afforded when they are collectively together. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dawn Sayer. She's going to finish up the last 3 competencies.
Good evening. Our 4th competency is communication. Our working definition of communication is students respectfully and effectively engage with others in multiple ways that encourage them to share, listen, learn, and contribute in a variety of settings. And what we want to ensure is that we're providing students the opportunity in our classrooms to build those skills in reading, writing, listening, and speaking in the communication. Our 5th competency is critical thinking. our definition for that is students think in a clear and creative way that is mindful of various solutions and the impact they have on others. What we want is to create learning environments where students have the opportunity to analyze a problem and solve it through active learning. And our last competency is problem solving. Students identify, prioritize, implement, and reflect upon creative solutions to complex problems. And what we hope to see is more of the teacher playing a facilitator role in the classroom while students are actively solving problems that are real-world problems in our community. And now this is where we say the fun begins. As Dr. Hopkins said, this is where we're bringing portrait to practice. We're bringing it to life in our classrooms. And as he mentioned, and we categorize the portrait to practice into 4 steps for this year: capture, leverage, learn, and grow. And the first step did start with our teachers. We held a session during WE Day. We had about 30 teachers in that session. It was K-12, mixed groups, content areas. And we went over, similar to presenting just the overview, the history, but the bulk of our conversation really was trying to capture those areas, K-12, what does collaboration look like in a K-2 classroom, in a 6-8 classroom, in a 9-12 classroom. And so we're going to continue to build those resources, collect that information from our teachers. I know Ms. Baldwin's going to work with our principals in January of unpacking the portrait. And again, we're going to scaffold those activities that we did in WE Day to collect that information and then get that to our principals so they can do it with all staff, and then our teachers can then do it with students. And so we'll have that information to where we can then develop what we're going to call learner progressions. So almost rubrics of what it looks like in each grade level. So our teachers, we have a consistent expectation of what each competency looks like as they move through K-12. The second step in that is leverage. One of the opportunities that I get to do in my role here is lead our Business Advisory Council, and I'm also a member of the WorkWise group in Westerville. And in my short time here, I've been so impressed with the support from this community, our business partners, and wanting to be involved with our students. And so we had our first meeting last month, and we were able to talk about the portrait and the competencies, and those are the competencies that businesses are looking for in employees. And we know that there's a shortage of employees right now, as we just talked about. But these skills, these competencies that we're going to instill in our students, and we have another document within our Business Advisory Council called Westerville Prepared. When our students leave, we want them to be Westerville prepared, knowing that they can walk into any of our businesses, any college, and be successful because they have those necessary academic content skills and the skills and aptitudes through our portrait. So what we're doing in our Business Advisory Council this year is really trying to solidify partnerships that will provide students with opportunities to either job shadow, internships, pre-apprenticeships, mentorships, any opportunity that they can to actually experience what it's like to be in that workforce area, so that they can make informed decisions on whether they want to go directly into the workforce or into college, and they're confident that when they pick their college major, they know that's what they want to do because they've had experiences along the way during their time here in Westerville. And so that's what we're going to continue to work on in our Business Advisory Council, is establishing those formal partnerships with our local businesses. The third step in Portrait to Practice is to learn. And this is where we're building an awareness with our teachers, our students, our parents, our community, and really in our curriculum team, as Ms. Relford and Dr. Knapp are going to share. We're working with our instructional coaches. As we look at curriculum, we look at standards, we're making sure that Portrait is alongside those conversations to make sure that we're intentionally embedding those competencies into the learning in our classrooms. And then our last part of our Portrait to Practice for this year is our teaching and learning team is spending time developing a 3-year plan. So how do we know that we're making progress? What are the data points that we're going to look at? Where do we want to be in 3 years from now when we look back? What are we going to say is successful in the implementation of our portrait? And so we'll be sharing that with you. We'll be working to develop that over the next month or so, and we'll share that 3-year plan with you once we finalize that. And then lastly, I just wanted to share that some comments that we received from our teachers, and I know that they're stressed. Everybody's having a hard time, but when we finished that session, they said, thank you. This has been uplifting. This has been empowering. This has been elevating for us, because they see this as an aligning document for them, that they see everything that they're doing coming together, and this is our why. So they were really excited about this work. And my last comment is, as we know, and a lot of times in education, we have a lot of new initiatives. And when you say that, people are either like, oh, we got to create buy-in for this. How are we going to create buy-in? And to me, something that we talk about is we don't want buy-in. We want people to believe in this work. And so that's what we're hoping for, is that our teachers, our parents, our students believe in this, and they understand why this is a part of their journey through Westerville K-12. So happy to answer any questions related to portrait, or do you want to wait till the end of that? Okay.
Keep going.
All right. No questions yet.
And so we want to make it connect across elementary and secondary. So I'll tell you about elementary, and then Dr. Knapp will tell you about secondary. At the elementary level, we are aligning our work with the Portrait of a Graduate by adopting research-based curriculum, materials, and resources that create opportunities for hands-on, high-quality instruction that prepares our students for success. Our Science, Social Studies, and Achievement Record Adoption and Review Committee are currently working to update the characteristics of a successful learner that many of our families see on our current achievement record. And we're identifying programs that align with grade level standards and the district competencies that you've heard us talk about tonight. We are currently using the PASS program to teach and support social and emotional learning for all of our elementary students, and we continue to provide opportunities for students to develop digital age skills, which are also part of our competencies that we've identified. We are also providing ongoing professional development for teachers that align to this work. And so just know at the elementary level, our work never stops. And you will hear us continuously talking about aligning the work so that it all makes sense, even at the elementary level. Dr. Knapp's going to talk about some work that secondary is currently doing with standards-based learning. And at the elementary level, that does look a little different, but what's key to understand is at the elementary level, standards are the foundation and basis of our work. We don't do anything without starting with the grade level standards and helping to build a common understanding and capacity among teachers and staff so that our work continues to be purposeful and meaningful. And finally, professional development is key. We want people to be well trained and prepared so that they can be of best service to our students. Dr. Knapp will tell you about secondary.
Thank you. Our Portrait of a Graduate work is a natural fit to several of our courses of study, including Lit Skills for College and Career Readiness, which every sixth grader takes, as well as our counselor curriculum. Several of the competencies also align with the standards for mathematical practices, which are embedded in all of our math courses. Others that have a foundation in these competencies include our Project Lead the Way courses, offered at both the middle and high school level. A Portrait of a Graduate competencies have also been incorporated into our professional learning opportunities as we continue to grow awareness and capture how these look in our classrooms. Moving to standards-based learning and having that focus will allow our teachers to focus on the mastery of essential standards, and it will provide 612 alignment, clarity and consistency for our students and teachers. As Ms. Relford mentioned, we've always focused on the standards. That's the core of our work. That's where we start. Really having the conversations with our teachers on what is essential. We kind of did that last year when we prioritized for pandemic. And now we're taking a step back, really focusing, allowing teachers to have the time and space to talk through this work. So this started in the summer. We began our standards-based learning by providing PD to all of our secondary administrators and department facilitators. It was important for us to have our building leaders go through this work. They identified some essential standards. They wrote proficiency scales. And it's so important for our principals to be connected with what the teachers are actually doing and having to, walk the walk so that as we're talking about this, they're in full alignment with our teachers. All secondary teachers participated in an August Westerville education session, which outlined this work. It was on a video. It was a little bumpy. I'll be honest. They did all get the same message, but we switched from being in person to watching a person on a video, so it lost a little bit of its luster. Identifying essential standards in individual courses began in earnest in September, and teacher teams are collaborating to identify these standards in over 60 secondary courses. We really wanted to go with who wants to do this work, who is engaged, and so we just sort of let that happen rather than trying to pick people and say, oh, we really need sixth grade science. We have all of our core content areas represented, and so that's a really, really great start. All secondary teachers will be meeting during January's early release to provide feedback on the essential standards. That's something that we were hoping to get done by the first semester. We reached out to our teacher teams. We talked with our department facilitators. They're like, can we just wait till early release? And so we've really had great conversations with them. And hey, if that's going to work for you, this is fluid. We want to listen and make this the best experience for you. So yes, we can go ahead and spend early release doing that work, which they were very appreciative of. So work will continue second semester with the development of proficiency scales for each of the essential standards, and we hope to begin developing assessments that align with these scales in late spring. We will then need to update our courses of study, as we look at essential standards and our pacing guides in particular. Okay, well, we spend, in seventh grade social studies the first half of the year on Rome and Greece, and it's not very many standards. As the teachers reflect in work, maybe we spend less time or maybe we spend more time, but just really helping to align our courses of study with the work that we're doing. So you may see some courses of study coming in the next few years with these tweaks. Over the next several years, this work will continue for all secondary courses as we look to have greater vertical and horizontal alignment and connection of instruction, assessment, and feedback to increase student ownership of learning and to provide educational equity to our students. I'm not going to necessarily go through this. You can just kind of scroll. I don't know if you can scroll. Yeah. So this is a visual that we put together, and we shared it with our teacher teams. All secondary administrators have seen it. And I presented in November's WE Day, and they said, okay, now I see the big picture. Now I see where this is going. This makes great sense. I kind of like the pictures. It's pretty visually appealing, I think. So they really appreciated seeing the whole thing. So that is an attachment in the slide. And now it's time for questions, Dawn.
Paul, just verbiage, so to help people maybe watching, talk about what we mean when we say a standard, and then you reference essential standards. So talk about what we mean when we say a standard and what we mean when we say an essential standard. I think that those are two terms we use that might be helpful to people. And how is a standard different than the attributes we were talking about?
So all of our courses are focused on Ohio's learning standards, which are adopted by you, and they're from the Ohio Department of Education. So if you go on Ohio Department of Education, you'll see social studies standards. For American history, there's 33. So what our team is doing is pulling out what is most essential. What do we want our students to know to mastery? And that will be the essential standard. And so that happens through a lot of conversation. For 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies, what was interesting is they really landed on those skills as the main crux of those were the essential standards because they have leverage, they have endurance, they may be on an assessment, and it would prepare them for the next grade. That's readiness. And then there's teacher judgment. So to identify essential standard, there are 5 components that teachers are looking to. Did I answer your whole question?
And
I think that helps.
Yeah, and then the difference between a standard and a competency is, you can see the competencies are those listed in the kind of puzzle pieces, if you will, and then looking how to link, for example, critical thinking to one of those essential standards is going to be something that our teachers are already doing, and we're just going to do it better.
Do one more to help, and then I'll open up. So Dawn, you referenced pathways courses we have, engineering, health, business, and logistics, and you reference them as kind of representative of the kind of curriculum we think is more representative of what's in the portrait. Can you talk about that a little bit more, why you pointed that out?
Yeah, so for example, in our health pathway, students at the end of that pathway can earn a certificate, an STNA. And so it's through those learning experiences, that active learning in the classroom, in our courses, that it's a non-traditional environment, which is what we want to try to replicate across our learning spaces. And so how can we, again, shift that role of the teacher to more of a facilitator of learning and let the kids, whether they are given a problem or they identify a problem, and they work through it together using all of these skills and the content standards to solve a problem or come up with a solution. And so it's that active learning, it's incorporating those businesses to provide those experiences. We need them to come into our classrooms or let our students go out and do learning outside of the classroom walls. And so again, breaking down that traditional model and providing those learning experiences in that way is really what we're trying to replicate across all of our classrooms. So.
So, Dawn, I'm going to ask you a question again. Have you done work with the Portrait of the Graduate before?
No, this is my first time. Yeah,
Okay.
so,
Okay.
yeah, so we, in my previous role with Hilliard, I led some work around, we called it our culture playbook, and it was very similar, just a different wording, but it was about the social emotional aspects and the content and how do they work together. So this is my first time I'm leading the Portrait of a Graduate work. Very grateful for the opportunity and also recognize the amount of work that the team before I got here has done to create such an important document to guide this work.
Sure. So, and you might not be able to answer this, and that's okay. Can you paint a picture? Because I think I have a really good idea how it will look at the high school level, but maybe something at the elementary school level. So maybe where we're looking at one of the 6 competencies, maybe 1 or 2, and really kind of bring that to life and how that would take place.
Yeah, I might have to lean on Mr. Elpp for that a little bit at elementary
I-
level. Yeah, I don't.
Oh, there she is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'll let you speak.
Yeah.
So at the elementary level, I think one thing that's really exciting is we're already doing a lot of this. When you think about the different learning opportunities we provide for our students on a daily basis, they promote collaboration and problem solving and critical thinking. So you're going to walk in an elementary classroom and you're going to see kids engaged in student discourse and being able to solve different problems using different strategies. We were very intentional when we purchased different programs, so like Bridges Math lends itself for kids learning a variety of strategies on how to solve a problem. And we're teaching them that there's no set way to solve a problem. You can get to it in different ways. And so we've kind of been on the cutting edge, I will say. And it's going to be a lot easier, I think, for the elementary level, just trying to help teachers recognize the work that we're doing and the evidence of student learning that we see in place and how we make those connections with the portrait. So when I brought up about the characteristics of a successful learner, that's embedded as in how we evaluate our students. And so just helping them make those connections as it relates to day-to-day instruction and student success, I think we're going to have a pretty easy way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. You brought up the Bridges Math,
Yes.
and that is a multisensory math program where
It
you
is.
work a lot in teams, right? So you're
Yes.
talking about a couple different competencies then in there when they're working on each unit every single day.
Every day.
Yeah, okay. That's kind of what I was looking for. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
This might be more of a joking, not joking comment, but our business logistics students, maybe they could sort out the transportation issues.
If they solve that, I will graduate them early with honors.
Right? Like,
Put them on the payroll.
straight path to graduation. No, thank you. I've, as everybody, I think, really appreciate the presentation. We've been talking about portrait for a long time. It started before I came onto the board, and that's always been my question is like, okay, that's great. What does it look like, and how does it change, the way that we teach and the way students learn? And you touched on this just a little bit, Ms. Relford, but I'm thinking about materials adoption, right? And so I can imagine, and as you touched on, this will impact the kinds of materials that we want to adopt into our classrooms. And I'm just wondering, like, as you're having these conversations, are you sort of bookmarking, like, okay, these materials are fitting really well with this. Here's some materials that maybe down the road when they're up for adoption, we might think about making a shift and sort of taking that work on as we go. Does that make sense to kind of keep track of it as we're going to think about what we really want our students to engage with in the classroom?
I would say yes and yes. And so we want to make sure we're taking all of that into consideration as we are selecting materials and resources for staff. With English language arts and with math, we've already established that. Right now, our current work at the elementary level, we're looking at science and social studies materials. And so we have the competencies out as we are doing that work currently. And so we have two different committees going on. The achievement record is a committee within itself. Some of the same teachers go across both, and then science and social studies teachers choose which one they want. We've accepted all volunteers, and they're out there, and we're trying to see where we see the evidence of those competencies and where we can make those connections for staff.
Great, thank you. I was sort of aware that work was going on and imagining the two were coming together, but
Yes.
just wanted to hear how it's working. Thank you.
Absolutely.
We have been talking about this a long time, it feels like, and I'm appreciative that at my last board meeting, you decided to come together and make this happen, so I really appreciate that. But all kidding aside, I am very, very thankful for you all and this team and the teachers that you've been meeting with and getting just that synergy going. I think you are very wise to try and make the shift from buy-in to believe-in. I think that's very wise because people will take a hill if they believe in something. They will fight through the doubts and the discouragements and all the things that are coming to try and knock you off course. And if you can take that buy-in, believe-in piece, and you can embed that into the families, into the parents, that they believe in what this means, and this can make a difference for their student, the one who is struggling and the one who is thriving, the one who is sitting in the back of the class wondering, why am I here, and the one who is just flying off the charts. We have 15,000 students, and we are trying to create space and place for each one of them to thrive. And I absolutely think you all are on the right path with this, and I'm very grateful for the work
Just to
that you've
follow up
done.
with that, thank you, Reverend Filardo, is we've been intentional about speaking to our staff, but also our students. We've been meeting, I met with some fifth graders and talked to them about it, and they were just so excited about, oh my goodness, this could be something. I met with some middle school students at Heritage in Walnut Springs recently, and just was talking to them about what are your best experiences in the classroom, and they were, talking about these things. And then we had an opportunity to meet with the Superintendent Student Council, and I believe one of the representatives is here in the audience tonight. I won't call him out, but they also shared some great input that we're using to help develop this along the way. So yes, thank you.
The reason Dr. Hopkins had an opportunity to talk to middle school kids is because he was doing lunch duty and covering study hall to help out with shortage on that day. So yeah, he is multi-skilled.
I would just add to that my appreciation for all of the hard work that I know you all have put into this process. I really appreciate the comprehensive nature of it. in that it brings about, as you all stated, alignment of research-based curriculum and materials that I think is extremely important, that is all centered around being standards-based to make sure that our students are achieving all of those things that are expected of them. So I would just say, I also really do believe, there it goes, the switch from buy-in to believe-in is absolutely essential. And so I think you could tell from our comments here this evening, you certainly have believe in coming from us as a board. So thank you all so much for your work, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future as we continue to progress beyond just a portrait to putting it into practice. Thank you all. As we move on, our next agenda item 6.01, are public comments. And these are public comments regarding agenda items. We have one person signed up to speak this evening. Public comments offered at this point are on agenda items 7.01 through 11.08. In accordance with the Westerville City School District's COVID-19 policies and guidelines, each speaker is required to continue to wear a mask or facial covering while addressing the board. Failure to comply with these guidelines will result in the speaker being reminded of the mask requirement. Time will not be credited back to the speaker, and any additional failure to comply will result in the forfeiture of any remaining time. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board. Please state the agenda item that you are referencing at the beginning of your comments. A timer will be shown on the screens, and Mr. Hershiser will call time when 5 minutes has elapsed. And our speaker for this evening is Ms. Peg Duffy.
My comments are in relation to 11.02, the in lieu of payments. The fourth whereas talks about in lieu of payment, the amount will be the amount required by law or the Department of Education reimbursement, whichever is larger. This also appears in the action portion. In all my years of following school board, I've never seen numbers on this, so I'm pleased to hear that Mr. Dorn has added this to the report. I'm looking forward to seeing what those numbers are. Other concerns were somewhat hit upon in earlier discussion on transportation. Under the third whereas, item number 5, reasons for declaring the need for in lieu of transportation, quote, disrupts current transportation schedule, unquote. I know and I appreciate what our transportation department has been doing, but I'm wondering if somewhere about Easter or then we should consider, will we need to ask for more people to be declared I should have in lieu of payments. In other words, if we are not in better shape by that point, we might have to think about that. Sounds brutal, but we might have to do that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7 this evening, financials. No financial reports for this evening. Moving on to agenda item 8, our personnel consent agenda, which is comprised of agenda items 8.01 through 8.13. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Dennis, would you please share with us this evening?
Thank you, and good evening, President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall. I would like to present to you for your consideration tonight's personnel consent agenda. The items on tonight's agenda represent our regular action items with regards to resignations, hiring, and contractual status changes. There are a few items, however, to be noted in tonight's agenda. There are a few one-time payments for activities outside of the workday. We have 2 retirements this evening. Please join me in congratulating Donna Kasanovich, who's retiring from Westerville Central High School with 10 years of service to the district. Additionally, Susan Bailey, who's also retiring from Westerville Central High School with 38 years of service to the district. If you will remember, on the November 22nd, 2021 board meeting, I shared the retirement of the district's custodial manager, Laura Enninger. During the last several weeks, Scott Dorn and his team facilitated a series of interviews, and on this evening's consent agenda is their recommendation for Bob Parsons, Jr., to be Westerville City Schools' next custodial manager. Bob, who is here with us this evening, has worked with the district for 29 years in the custodial field and looks forward to bringing his expertise to the role. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Questions? Okay. Thank you. No questions.
Maybe just a quick welcome to Bob into his new role. We're just really thrilled that you are staying, you're taking on this role, and it is not an inconsequential role that you are taking on. So thank you, and thank you for being here tonight for us to celebrate you.
Welcome. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 9, old business. Is there any objection to accepting agenda items 9.01 through 9.07 together as a consent item? Since any feedback that we have received for these policies have been incorporated into them. So unless there's additional changes or discussion that you'd like to have on them, any objection to receiving them as a consent agenda? Okay. May I please have a motion and a second to receive items 9.01 through 9.07?
So moved?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 10, which is new business. Agenda item 10.01 for a first reading, policy 5464, early high school graduation revisions. Ms. Baldwin, would you please share with us this evening?
Sure. Good evening, President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall. This policy has been revised to reflect changes in the test requirements and their impact on acceleration and graduation. New language fits the current Ohio State test model in which students take end-of-course exams versus a series of exams at the end of their sophomore year. So instead of speaking to the Ohio graduation test, it speaks to the state assessments. It's a pretty quick one. Any questions, that one?
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 10.02 for a first reading, policy 5630.01, positive behavior intervention and supports and limited use of restraint and seclusion revisions. Dr. Hopkins, would you please share with us?
President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall, the revision of policy 5630.01 adds updates to definitions for specific terms that are often associated with PBIS, such as de-escalation techniques, and how and when the use of seclusion and/or restraint should be employed. The revisions also include references to the need for ongoing professional development for all staff regarding these important topics. I would like to note that the district has already started much of this professional learning with all of our staff and are continually reviewing our processes to ensure that supports are provided for all of our students and staff. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for Dr. Hopkins? Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 11, which are recommended action and standing business items. Agenda item 11.01, overnight and out-of-state field trips. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second?
Ms. Baldwin, would you please share with us about these trips?
Yes, good evening. You have two different trips for your approval this evening. The first is with Westerville South High School, and that's a trip during spring break to Portugal and Spain with Lisa Bauman. It is part of Westerville Worldwide and a group of our teachers that look to develop experiences for students to travel outside of the country during school breaks, so spring break and summer. These students will be traveling with EF Tours, who have a history of really taking care of our students and families, especially within the pandemic traveling. Our students will be required to either show proof of vaccination or negative COVID test before returning to school because it is during spring break. And then the second set of trips are our Washington, D.C. trips for our 8th graders, and these trips are contingent upon our middle schools having sufficient number of chaperones. Our students, because they would be traveling in the end of April and May, would also have that same requirement of submitting vaccination status or a negative COVID test upon returning to school.
Okay, any questions from, okay?
And you know what, Ann, you might not be able to answer this yet. So what if a kid would get COVID during the trip? How would we handle that?
So for the out-of-country, EF Tours would actually pay to fly the family to that student so that they could quarantine with them and be with them. For DC, we are notifying families that they would actually need to go to DC and pick up their student if they become ill. So there is a provision that they would have a room available for isolation in the event that someone comes down with an illness, but parents would be expected to pick up their student because they wouldn't be able to travel back on the bus.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 11.02, payment in lieu of transportation. Mr. Dorn, would you please share with us about this? Or, I'm sorry, may I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Now, Mr. Dorn, would you please share with us?
Yes, good evening, President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall. This resolution is requesting the board approve adding a student to the impractical to transport list. Ohio law allows for public schools to determine impracticality of transportation after consideration of a number of factors such as cost of providing transportation and the number of students transported. In May of 2021, the board passed a resolution declaring 4 students impractical for transportation. This resolution adds 1 additional student after a request for services came in late October. The Office of Purchasing and Logistics evaluates each listed private school student per the requirements of Section 3327.02 of the Ohio Revised Code for determination status. Approving this resolution would allow the district to offer payment in lieu of transportation in the manner provided for by the Ohio Revised Code. Essentially, the payment in lieu amount is determined by the state. From the recent provisions in the budget bill, the minimum amount for payment in lieu is to be 50% of the amount determined by the department as the average cost of pupil transportation from the previous school year. The cost for fiscal year 20 was approximately $1,055 per student, so the payment in lieu is established at 50%, or approximately $527. The cost for fiscal year 21 has not been established at this time.
questions for Mr. Dorn? Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes, that motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 11.03, approval of resolution for POR and SD design stage submission and LFI MOU for the Whittier Elementary School renovation and addition included in the ELPP project. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Dorn.
Yes, thank you. This presentation will actually introduce you to the next 4 agenda items pertaining to the phase submission approval process related to the district's participation in the expedited local partnership program with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. The resolution presented here, or the resolutions presented here, are for the approval of 3 of the 4 stages of design: the Program of Requirements, or POR phase, the Schematic Design, or SD phase, and the Design Development, or DD phase, for both the Hawthorne Elementary Renovation Project and the Whittier Elementary Renovation and Addition Project. The Program of Requirements represents what will make up the school in terms of the types of spaces in the building. Schematic Design is then the layout conception phase of the design. The design development phase is the more detailed phase for the design that then leads into the construction document phase submission. The construction document phase review for these 2 projects is scheduled for submission to the OFCC in January of 2022. As noted, these projects are part of our expedited local partnership program project with the OFCC, and it is required for the board to approve each phase of the design. The design first goes to the OFCC's regional program consultant for review for compliance with the Ohio Facility Construction Commission's Ohio School Design Manual and identification of the locally funded initiatives, the LFI, before coming to the board for approval. This project has met the OFCC standards and is now before you. It is being recommended that the board approve the POR, SD, and DD stage submissions for the Hawthorne and Whittier projects, authorize the superintendent and treasurer to sign the locally funded initiative memorandum of understanding, documents completed by the OFCC's RPC for the appropriate stage submissions for each project, and authorize the design team to continue with the preparation of the construction documents stage for both projects.
Okay, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Any questions for Mr. Dorn here?
Just thank you for stating what the acronyms are, because I think they're really hard for me, so I'm sure they're hard for the public.
Okay. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Agenda item 11.04 is the resolution approving the design development stage submission for the LFI MOU for Whittier Elementary renovation and addition included in the ELPP project. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved?
Second.
Any questions for Mr. Dorn? Okay. Ms. Marshall?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 11.05. This is a resolution approving the POR and SD design stage submission and LFI MOU for the Hawthorne Elementary School renovation included in the ELPP project. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Okay. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes, that motion carries. Agenda item 11.06 is the resolution approving the design development stage submission and the LFI MOU for the Hawthorne Elementary School renovation included in the ELPP project. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved?
Second?
Any questions? Okay. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion is adopted. And moving on to agenda item 11.07, which is a resolution approving the renovation of Westerville South High School Phase 4. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Dorn?
The Phase 4 renovation work is the south academic wing on the first floor for bid package 1, and the media center located on the second floor, which was bid package 2. The scope of work is similar to the Phase 2 and Phase 3 work and includes the renovation of 25 existing classrooms and converting them into 20 classrooms to provide for larger academic spaces. The work also includes renovations to the media center and constructing a satellite cafe located as you enter the media center, thus completing the construction of the satellite cafes for all of our high schools. Bids were solicited per the Ohio Revised Code on November 1st, and we received 3 bids that were publicly read on December 7th. The lowest responsible bid was submitted by Place Services in the amount of $4,462,700 as a combination bid for both packages, and includes 7 of the 9 alternates as shown on the bid tab. Place Services bid is 11% under Triad's estimate and keeps us compliant with the $38 million total project budget. Place Services was also the successful bidder for the Phase 3 work, scheduled for completion this month, and provides for a smooth transition as we move from Phase 3 to Phase 4. The substantial completion date for Phase 4 is scheduled for August 1st, with Phase 5 scheduled to start the same month. We remain on schedule to complete all 6 phases by the end of July in 2023, and it is being recommended that the board accept a bid from Place Services as presented.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Dorn on this one? No. Okay, thank you, Mr. Dorn. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. That motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 11.08, the appointment of President Pro Tem. May I please have a motion and a second to appoint Jen Altman as the President Pro Tem from January 1st, 2022 until the election of the next board president on January the 10th of 2022. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Okay, let's move on quick before she changes her mind. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes, and that motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 12, which are public comments for this evening.
Look at Mark run.
There's got to be more discussion about Jen.
Okay, public comments. Let's see here. In accordance, again, with the Westerville City School District's COVID-19 guidelines, each speaker is required to continue to wear a mask or facial covering while addressing the board. Failure to comply with these guidelines will result in the speaker being reminded of the mask requirement. Time will not be credited back to the speaker, and any additional failure to comply will result in the forfeiture of any remaining time. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board. A timer will be shown on the screens, and Mr. Hershiser will call time when 5 minutes has elapsed. Please keep your comments professional, avoid the use of inappropriate language, and refrain from identifying individuals in the event of a complaint. Please address your comments to the board and not to the audience. And our first speaker for this evening is Ms. Peg Duffy.
Probably this board and all of those who have served before realize that in your service as board members, no doubt it's been frustrating and downright disappointing when you hear that you don't listen or that the board is a rubber stamp. But I have to ask, have the boards, this one and others, stop to consider why people have that perception? Parents come to board and speak often in excess of their allotted time about a situation with their student. Frequently, there may be another side to that story that can't be revealed. So rather saying that we're looking into it, be upfront that federal law limits what can be said. Even the lunch ladies learn that in their basic training. Voter education can ease a lot of these situations. By the time parents and residents come to board to speak publicly, they want answers, not just for themselves, but for others. We'll get back to you, or let's talk one-on-one. These are unsatisfactory responses. The question was asked in public, answer it in public. The most recent meeting was an example of rubber stamp mindset. A motion was made and seconded to appoint to the library board. No member raised a point of order when the motion did not include the name of the appointee. The name may have been on those screens in front of you, but we in the audience neither saw it on our agendas nor heard it in the motion. There had been a more egregious parliamentary gaffe early in the fall. Avoid the rubber stamp perception and be cognizant of parliamentary rules as you act. All too often, I sense that the general public is seen as not astute enough to grasp the framework under which decisions are made. As a result, sufficient background information is just passed over. I ask you to make a New Year's resolution for yourselves. Help us to understand we are educable.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 13, which are board comments. Who would like to begin this evening?
You can go.
We'll make him last.
Okay. I'll go first. Vaughn, I want to thank you this year for your leadership and for listening. I truly appreciate that. For Rick, I want to thank you for your 8 years of service and all that you've given in your heart, and to your family, because Cynthia, Stephen, Anthony, those 8 years, I'm sure, are hard on you, and thank you for letting your loved ones serve for all the children. And for the staff and for all of us. I deeply appreciate that. For our staff going into winter break, I wish a relaxing winter break to you. We are not meant to be in crisis this long with our bodies, and I know it's been so hard and so tough. So please don't answer emails. Please just go be with your loved ones and relax. And that's it, and have a great break. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try not to cough. I'm fighting it off here, so sorry about that. I want to also thank you, President Bell, for your great service. I know this isn't, it is not an easy job to make these meetings run smoothly, and I just appreciate you taking that on. And it's been fun to watch you grow. I remember after your first meeting, we talked a little bit about like, oh, okay, well, that, there's some things to learn, and you've learned them. So thank you for taking that on. Mr. Velardo, it's been 8 years. It probably seems like 100. But you have truly made a difference for kids and for staff members, and I thank you for that, for this community. Appreciate all you've done. And I wish you lots of free Monday nights in the future. And I do, and I think Mr. Parsons left. I didn't really get a chance to congratulate him on his new position and our retirees on their free days now. And, I think you put it so well, Mrs. Davidson, we're not meant to be in crisis mode for this long, and it really just takes its toll. And I don't have any solutions for that. I know that's our staff, it's our administrators, it's our families when that phone rings at 5:55 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly you have to make adjustments. And all we can do is to try to make those pieces work better where we can, and to appreciate the efforts that everybody's making. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And I think, oh, Mrs. Duffy, thank you for your comments too. It is something that I think we collectively work on, and I'm really committed to working on, is we're an educational organization, and I do find that sometimes we go a little bit fast, and I know I ask a lot of questions. Sometimes those questions are for me, and sometimes they're questions that I've had and had the opportunity to get answered, but trying to raise those, but I think we can always do better in that. So thank you for the reminder. I truly appreciate it. So, thank you.
I would just like to thank all of my fellow board members for your service throughout this year. This has been a challenging year for all of us in the midst of a global pandemic and figuring out exactly how do we do education in the midst of all that we have been presented with. I would also like to thank all of the administrators and staff for all that you have given out. You have worked tirelessly, we know, to help our young people become, our students to become all that they can be. And so we truly appreciate all that you say and all that you do. I would also like to encourage all of our staff to, over the course of the winter break, to please take some time to relax, replenish, refresh, spend some time, some downtime with your family and loved ones. And so I want to wish everybody a happy holiday season, and we look forward to getting things going once again in the month of January when we return. And finally, I would like to say to Reverend Villardo, a sincere thank you for your 8 years of dedicated service, again, to the staff, students, and families of the Westerville City School District. You know how much I love you and appreciate you. And so I look forward to continued friendship. I know you'll be available on Monday nights now, but we'll still have to work around that time frame. But I just want you to know how much love you and appreciate you, and thank you so much for all that you have done. And with that, we yield the floor to you, sir.
That's a mistake, brother. I've wondered what I would say at this time, and just have thought about a lot of different things. I truly want to thank my family, and clearly I owe my 2 sons something for having sat through this entire meeting. This is the first and only meeting they have ever sat entirely through. And I'm grateful for their presence and for my bride's presence as well, making them sit here during the whole meeting. But I appreciate that for all the support that you have given. And just to so many people in this community who have allowed me to serve and just have affirmed things that I have tried to do. I just want to say thank you to all the folks out there that have been supportive of me. To the folks who work on this floor, I cannot tell you how good I feel about the hands that this school district is in, the folks who work here. I can't call out all names, but I have the utmost confidence in John Kellogg, certainly Dr. Kellogg, but John Kellogg and Nicole Marshall, Miss Marshall. What they bring to this district is more than most of you know. And I have a great deal of confidence in them, and I'm thankful for their leadership, both. I do want to say just a word to Miss Jill Beck, who clearly really is in charge. We know that, we understand that, and what she has done for me personally behind the scenes. I do want to thank the previous board members. Served with some really good people. Carol French, who one time when I was up here saying something confronted me so harshly that I was taken aback. And then I understood what she was doing and why she was doing it, and I was really grateful afterwards. To Jerry Cotter, who has the unique combination of a sharp mind and a very tender heart, and I hope she knows that. To Richard Byrd, who just surprised all of us every time he opened his mouth and threatened to debate every state legislator he could, and none of them took him up on it, and I'm not surprised. And to Dr. Nestor Baker, who couldn't be here tonight, and I know would have wanted to be here tonight, and Ms. Altman and Ms. Davidson, it's been an honor to serve along. You all as well, I've learned a lot from you, and I want you all to know that you're really in very good hands here. This is a good board. It's a good board. It's an imperfect board. It will be better. And I truly believe that. To Vaughn, just really great leadership this year. And I know what it's like to lead in a pandemic year, and just an outstanding job, or as we like to call each other, it's clearly brothers from a different mother. But I'm very thankful for who you are and what you've brought to all of us. I just have tried in very imperfect ways to listen, and I personally think meeting one-on-one is a really good thing to do. And I have been really blessed when people have been willing to do that. I have been guided by, I have tried to have been guided by an ancient Greek text that I have up here framed, and I've had it here for 8 years, and it simply says, whatever is true, and whatever is right, whatever is noble, and whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, and whatever is admirable, if there is anything excellent or praiseworthy, think on those things. I've tried to listen to people at that podium and climb in their shoes and see what they were saying behind the words that they were speaking. Because all of us have words behind the words that we speak. And I won't keep you much longer, President Bell, but I wrote something in 2017, and I wrote it on behalf of the board, and I wrote it to the entire school district. And in 2017, in February, the district was going through a difficult time. You can look back and learn what that was. But here are some of the words I wrote that many teachers responded with gratitude, and I think I want to kind of leave with these words. We live in a world that is increasingly strident and divisive, and communicates anger more than acceptance and accusation more than love. Out of this culture, our students try to learn. while our teachers, staff, and administrators work very hard to create a welcoming and nurturing environment. What we wish to say, the board at that time, is essentially one thing to our students, their families, teachers, staff, and administrators. We love you. We accept you. And we will always try to build a culture and environment of grace and love, nurture and care, in which you can learn, grow, and know that you are accepted. Beyond the world in which we live, there is the world we all are trying to create. One in which all voices can be heard. All opinions can be expressed. Debate without rancor can be explored. And still we are determined to see the humanness in each other. We pledge to you, dear students, families, teachers, staff, and administrators, even in our differences, we will strive to be a uniting and caring force. Westerville City School District, it's a place where you belong. It has been beyond an honor to serve here. I pledge my full and undivided support to Ms. Myers. And if there is any way I can help you transition into this chair, anything that you need for the sake of your transition and for the sake of the district, please know that you can call on me. I think you're going to be a very good board member. I am confident of that. You are coming into what I think is a very good board and a very strong district. And I am beyond thankful for the opportunity to have served.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to agenda item 14, the dates, times, and locations of next meetings. The board will meet for a special session on Thursday, December the 16th, 2021 at 7:30 a.m. and in an organizational regular session on Monday, January the 10th, 2022 at 6 o'clock p.m. here at the Early Learning Center located at 936 East Wind Drive, Westerville, Ohio. As a reminder, space will be limited to 50 people to comply with health and safety protocols based on CDC guidance. Masks will be required and social distancing will be observed. Moving on to agenda item 15, which is adjournment. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Allman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes, that motion carries, and we are adjourned.